let's try creating a method. A method in object-oriented parlance is the same thing as a function. They are exactly the same thing. It's just when a function is attached to an object, then you have to call it a method. It's just a change in vocabulary. So let's give one a shot. We have a function already. This is a function, as we already explained, but let's write our own function. So let's do something real simple. Let's create a function called, how about add two? Let's add two numbers together. That's usually what I do in these exercises. I'll do it public first, and I'll tell you why it doesn't need to be public. So we'll do a public, and we're going to add two numbers together, which implies an integer. And I'll call it add two ints. And then I'll give it two arguments, the two numbers that we want to add together. It'll be an integer, which I'll call num1, and a second integer called num2. Okay. So at this point, I have created my own function. And in C#, I like them down like this. That's better. Visual Studio makes you do that. MonoDevelop doesn't, so it's a little bit of a culture shock for me to work in MonoDevelop when I work in Visual Studio most of the time. But that aside, here we have our own method being created. Public is the access modifier. That means it can be seen outside of the class. We'll do a lot more with that here in a few minutes in the next video. This is the return type, so the principal parts of a function are pretty much always the same. You always have a return type. You have the name of your function. You have your arguments, and your arguments are always inside of parentheses. And then you have the curly brace, and inside the curly brace is code block for the function. So I'll do this a long way just so we can get some practice. Let's create a variable for the result. And then all we're going to do is add num1 and num2. All right, so when you include arguments, they're automatically created as variables and they're accessible within the method. And then we have to return the result. So we could have done this in one block. We could have just said return num1 plus num2 and it'd be the same thing. But I wanted to get some practice with creating your own variables, since ostensibly this is probably the first time you've ever done this before. Okay, so we've got this. If we were to run it, we would see no change at all because the method is never called. We never actually use it anywhere. So let's fix that. Let's say let's do a var, my addition problem equals add two ints. And we'll add together 2 or 3 and whatever key is under my finger, apparently 5, and there we go. And we could run this, and again, it wouldn't give us anything different because we haven't displayed the result. So let's display the result. A little bit off the screen there, but we can manage. All right, so I'm going to write to the console 3 plus 5, which is just static text. I'm going to concatenate, which means you're adding in text, basically. You're just kind of sticking the result onto the end, and C# will automatically convert the type into a string for you. You don't have to. You could come in here and say toString, but you don't have to. There. But you don't have to, that's redundant, so I usually just leave it off. Okay, let's give that a try. I'm going to say run without debugging. And I have an error, so let's see what that is. Oh, I forgot to make this static. Let's try that. There we go. you can't call a non-static from a static. It just doesn't work. So let's try that. Okay, 3 plus 5 equals 8. And we still have the hello world from earlier. Okay, there we go. So that's our very first method. I was trying to keep this minimalist, which is why I forgot about static. But anytime you're in a static environment, everything you call has to also be static. It's just one of those things. Again, we'll cover static in greater detail a little bit later. The only reason it's here now is because command line programs have to be static. You're stuck with it. Okay, so that's your very first method being created. I promised I would tell you a better way to do this. We don't really need this to be visible outside of the class because this particular class is never going to be used by anything else. It's the main entry point for our program, so it's not being imported by another class and used. So there's really no reason for this to be public. It really should be private. So private just means that you can't see it outside of this class, and I'll show you a very practical result of this when we create our own class in a future video. But for now, really just needs to be private, and it's hidden. And that means the only thing that is exposed is the main method, which is as it should be. That won't change the way it works. You can still save everything, save all, did that already, and then you can start without debugging. And you still get the same result.